Okay, students, for our last video for this week of the week of setup, I want to talk to you a little bit about still life. Maybe about some of the materials that you're going to want to collect, pick up. You can start doing that now. Some of it you can wait till later, but I want to kind of go into the anatomy of a still life and how it is a really important step in basically making a good painting. Whatever your subject matter is, whether it's still life or not, that first step is really picking a subject that looks good or it's going to translate into a painting that you want. Right now, I'm going to give you a quick demo on showing you how to make a viewing window that will fit the proportions of whatever size canvas that you're using. It's really handy. You can make several of these to fit the canvases that you have or, whatever. And that'll help frame your composition. Okay, so if you want to make a viewing window that basically replicates the sort of dimensions of your canvas or drawing paper for my drawing students, the same principles apply. You can tear out a sheet of your drawing paper and use this same technique to create a viewing window that will work for all your 18 by 24 inch drawing paper. And for my painting students, for each different size canvas that you use, you can make a new one of these if you find them useful. But essentially, it's just some kind of simple geometry tricks. I went ahead and got this canvas. Here's a small piece of card stock that I found out in my garage. You could use maybe I don't know, note cards or anything that might work for this piece of cardboard, and just sort of set it in the middle of the canvas the best that you can. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered. Might put a couple pieces of tape on just to make sure it doesn't shift around on you while you're working. So what I do is I take this ruler and I line it up to the exact corner here to the exact corner there. Make sure those lines are perfectly straight. And doesn't matter how long this line is, just put it right there in the cardstock, like so. And then I can go from this corner to this corner and do the same. Okay, so I have my X. Now, what will happen is I can pick any kind of random number. Let's say, well, let's see, 2 inches would give me about here. That seems pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and pick 2 inches. And if I pick 2 inches, what I do is go 2 inches from the very center of the X out each one of these lines, perfectly 2 inches. Okay, cha-cha-cha. Same thing over here. Here. And 2 inches on this side. Again, it doesn't have to be 2 inches. Just whatever number you choose, you got to make sure you do it on all 4 sides. Could be 3 inches, could be whatever. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove the cardstock. Don't forget to do that. And using my ruler, just go ahead and connect the dots. Or if you want to be really risky, you can go ahead and just start cutting. Though I like to kind of make sure that this does look like it's truly has 90-degree angles before I cut. Finish drawing. Here and here. Right where those lines intersect. Cha-cha, and one more. Okay, so proportionally speaking, this viewing window has the same sort of proportions as this. It's obviously not the same size, but it's got the right dimensions. And so anything that I see through this little opening, once I cut it out, will match what I would see or what I would want to draw on my canvas or drawing paper. It's just a neat little way of being able to sort of pre-assess your composition, sort of feel what it's going to look like before you even waste any time putting pencil or paint to the page. Go ahead and carefully cut this out, hopefully on a cutting board if you have one. Not on your mom's nice kitchen table. Okay, and now that you have your viewing window, which is of the same proportion of either your drawing paper or, for painters, your canvases, this is something that you can view your still life through to help, pre-see the composition. But one other little compositional trick I want to talk about, and this is often taught in design classes, is sort of these lines of interest that happen naturally when a viewer looks at any kind of rectangle. And what that means is, so when presented with any type of rectangle, the viewer scans the rectangle very quickly without even realizing it along the third marks. So each part of this is divided up into thirds, this way and this way. And their eye scans very quickly through here and up and down through there. And it happens so rapidly. In fact, your eye continually scans the image using those marks. So what has been discovered is that when you make a composition that is aware of these lines and you put things of interest along these lines, the image tends to be more pleasing. So that's something to keep in mind when you set up a still life. Now, even more important is where those lines intersect. So in these little hot spots here, right here, 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 and here, those are all areas that are even more important in some regards, because those areas are getting scanned more than once as the eyes rapidly scan this rectangle. And it doesn't matter what size rectangle you have, as long as you divide it into thirds, you basically make a composition or you have these scan lines. You'll notice this in your iPhone. Sometimes when you're cropping, or whatever kind of phone you have, when you're cropping a photograph, they'll already have these lines there, and they sort of shrink and grow to the thirds of the diameter of whatever size rectangle that you're going to crop to. And that's because these lines are of interest. You want to make sure that some of the interesting parts of the image falls along these lines. And just as an example, we can see in this picture, here's the rule of thirds, right? The rectangle has been divided up into thirds. And we have what is like a shoreline and a lighthouse here. And it's just sort of placed right in the middle of the page. Sometimes people think the middle of the page would be the most ideal spot for something. But it looks a little wrong. It feels like a lot of this space up here in the sky really has no meaning, doesn't really support anything, and I don't know, just the placement of the shoreline itself feels out of place. Now we have the same image, but this time, right in the middle of one of the hot spots is where the buildings reside, and the shoreline falls along one of these thirds. And now all this extra space down here, even though it's not of, maybe not as much of a subject matter as buildings themselves, feels like it's supported by the fact that it's a place for the eye to flow to. It's the interest of this area right here is now supported by sort of the empty space, the emptier spaces down here. It just makes more visual sense. It looks better. It's a better composition. Okay, students, so what does this mean? First, let's just talk a little bit about the things that you're going to need to collect, because
again, part of the setup of this class, or part of your responsibility as a student, is to get different things to paint. You know, a small collection of bottles or interesting looking cups, different kind of bowls and other types of ware, some small pieces of fabric. They don't need to be that large, but you know, neutral colors are nice, and things without a lot of patterns are better, especially when you're first starting. Another nice thing, types of fruit. You know, you can invest in just a little bit. It's not a big deal. If you keep it in the fridge, you'll end up being able to eat it anyways, but you know, maybe things with different complementary contrast. Also notice that over here we have a strong light, and that should be consistent throughout the time of the painting. So what we have are a few objects that I went ahead and sort of picked for my still life. And I'll show you how this viewing window now, I can move this around, zoom in and out, until I pick a composition that looks good to me. There. Notice the blue bottle is sort of along one of the thirds. The fruit in the bowl tend to be on one of the hot spots. The table tends to be around one of the thirds there too. There's plenty of room on the table itself so that I can see the interesting cast shadows. And there's plenty of stuff in the background to add some interest. Sorry, I'm wiggling. Okay, so the anatomy of a still life and how to achieve a good one.